What has been your greatest accomplishment thus far?
My greatest accomplishment thus far, I think
Right.
my 6 children.
How about choosing and managing their careers? What would your advice be?
You have to be happy with the kind of work that you do. If you're a professional person and you don't like yourself and you get up in the morning, you that's not a good career, to my way of thinking. So first, find a career that you're very interested in, very happy to get out of bed in the morning to go do. Then you'll be happy.
Hi everyone, I'm Jeffrey Arlen Fitzpatrick, middle son of Thomas and Joan. And I just wanted to say that I think that we were raised by the best parents ever. And my dad was very special. I learned so much from him, and I always wanted to be just like my dad. Obviously, I have a lot of work to do, but a little story. I and Tim and Dennis were very fortunate in that we got to very early on go to work with Dad, and we collected a lot of heck from our sisters because they didn't get to go, but we were very felt very special about getting to do that. And one particular Saturday, we were all going to get our haircuts also, and there was a place down on First Avenue called Cisco's, and we went there and walked in, and it was packed. There was nowhere to sit, and Dad directed us to go and sit in the back, stand in the back, and he walked right to the barber chair, and Cisco sat him right down, and zip zang boom, he was gone. And he said, "I'll be back to pick you up when you guys get done." Well, soon after the rumbling started, the people in front wanted to know who the heck he was, and how come he butted in line. And anyway, there was another fella getting his hair cut by Dad, and they knew each other, and he quieted him down and said that you're best not to monkey with him, and that he's the best cement finisher in the city of Cedar Rapids. And right then, I knew long before, but it verified that my dad was well respected, and I once again wanted to be just like my dad. I was very fortunate also in that I was born on my dad's birthday, and felt very special about that too. And actually, my mom told me I was his birthday present, and so then I know what you're all thinking. There were many times he was searching for the gift receipt, and I'm still trying to live up to his good way of living, and he's still with me, and I love you, Dad. I'm gonna miss you. Thank you.
My life lesson from Dad is generosity. And I have two stories I wanted to share that exemplify this. The first one is actually hearsay, but I got it from a good source. Dad had a younger brother, Donnie, who's with us here today. And when Donnie was probably about 9, he really fell in love with a bike in a storefront window. Dad, being the good older brother, told Donnie that he'd get the bike for him, but he'd have to be patient because Dad would have to make payments on it. And at this time, Dad had a job that probably didn't pay a whole lot, so this, I think, was probably quite a sacrifice for him. So finally he did pay off the bike, and he brought it home, and Donnie got the bike. And we think probably the store shop had to put in new glass because Donnie wore it out just waiting and waiting for that bike. But that certainly is one example of Dad's huge heart and his generosity. My own personal story is in 1969, when Mom and Dad drove me on my long trip to Winona, Minnesota, where I was going to my first year of college at College of St. Teresa. One example of both of their generosity was that as a surprise to me, they invited Mark to ride along, and I knew that it was going to be a long time before I'd see him again, and I was going to miss him a lot. So that was one example for both of them. But after unpacking me and going shopping and buying me all kinds of wonderful things for my room, we were all getting ready to leave, and Dad gave me one of his signature bear hugs, and he pressed something into my hand, and then he just whispered in my ear, "This is for later, just stick it in your pocket." So they drove off, and as I was sobbing on my way back to my new room, I reached in my pocket and I pulled out a crisp $100 bill. And I'd never seen a $100 bill before. So Dad taught me the value of always being generous and having an open heart and always thinking of someone else. And that's just the way he always was. I love you, Dad.
How should they raise their children?
How should they raise their children? Well, I guess about the same way I try to raise mine. Be honest, hardworking. Try to talk them into as much education as we possibly could. And teach them the difference between right and wrong.
What is the most important thing in your life right now?
The family.
It was late June, early July, and we were working on the medical center on 5th Avenue and 10th Street. And we were hired as subcontractors because the general contractor was falling behind and was going to get penalized. So they hired us and they offered us bonuses if we could catch them up and get them on time. So that day the trucks were coming right and left. And it was hot. Everybody was stripped down to their waist. Nobody had their shirts on. And we didn't hardly have time for breaks. So I called over and asked Dennis to come over. He was kind of in a down time, and I asked him if he'd go get me a cigarette. And so he ran over to Dad's truck, and not only did he get me a cigarette, but he went above and beyond, and he actually lit the cigarette for me. And it was hot, and it was windy, and he threw the match down. The wind caught it, blew it right back into the truck. Dennis shuts the door, didn't notice, shuts the door, comes over, hands me the lit cigarette, and I thank him. And just about then, a car comes down the street with honking his horn and rolls his window down and says, "Hey, your truck's on fire." And sure enough, the entire cab was just a ball of flames. Because Dad kept a whole bunch of matches down below. And of course, there were clothes in there. And so it went up fast. We went, pulled everything out, went back to work because we still had trucks backed up. And so a little later on, Dennis is really nervous. He comes up and he said, "Do you think Dad will fire me?" And my only counsel to him at that point was, I don't think I'd use the word fire. But later on that night, then it was time to wash down all the soot and the smoke and the dust, and we were heading to go get a beer, cold beer after work. And Dad went to the truck and realized he didn't have a shirt. So one of the guys that worked for us, who was a size medium, found a shirt that said Freddy's Surf Shop on it. And when Dad put it on, he looked like the Hulk. And so that's how we went to the bar that night. And, you know, I waited for him to blow up. I really did. You know, any other man would have just been beside himself and at least swore or did something. But, you know, he was so patient and showed such restraint. And, you know, he wasn't going to let a bad word ruin a loving relationship. And it was just such a great testament to the way he is. So.
What is the best thing about children, and what is the most frustrating thing?
Best thing about children, I guess, is you just never know what to expect. And no two are ever alike.
Right.
And they just keep you busy. They're busy little rascals, and that's kept her a lot more busy than did me. Kept her mother more busy than me. I can't say there's anything too frustrating. Well, I guess after they got older, being in construction and having all my tools and having everything exactly where I wanted it, after they got to 11 or 12 years old, that never happened ever again. Things have been different ever since. Dennis even burnt my truck up one time because he was trying to do me a favor. So that didn't work. I mean, you know, there's a lot of little things that happen that were frustrating, but they're kind of funny now.
Right.
You'll be glad that you mentioned that.
You've probably heard a story about me setting a truck on fire when actually it was Tim's fault because he wanted me to light a cigarette for him. And the end of the story is such that he picked me up from school the next day, and when I opened the door, the whole seat was missing because it had to be replaced. And he just looked up at the ceiling, at the black ceiling, and just went like this and didn't say anything to me for the rest of the ride home. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Driving his truck, and the whole inside of the truck was gutted because, you know, it was ignited. And so we were waiting on the rest of the seat to, you know, be replaced. And so every day Dad would drive us to school, and Dad would be up here driving the truck, and here would be our heads. And we couldn't even see out the front window. So I had to take on the punishment with Dennis after the fire for an entire month. So that's it.
My youngest sister Denise shared a story that was kind of an add-on to one that Tim and Dennis shared with you. I also wanted to share one of her own personal stories, so I'm going to read what she sent to us. One day, after a long, tedious day of kindergarten, I came home crying. I had a day of shaming by the teacher, comparing me to my twin across the hall. He could tie shoes, and I couldn't be bothered to learn. Anyway, after exhausting all of my resources through my siblings to teach me how, I was left crying on the couch at a loss as to what to do the following morning when I was going to be tested by the teacher. Dad came home, covered in his usual light gray concrete dust with tired eyes. I overheard him ask Mom in the kitchen what was wrong, and she told him. He came to me and told me to wait for him right there, and he'd be right back in 10 minutes. He returned refreshed, clean, and carrying a still covered in dust work boot. He sat beside me with the boot facing him in his lap and patiently taught me how to tie his boot. The lessons that day were more than one. A. Love your children right where they are and make each one feel that they're your favorite. I know we all feel like the favorite. It was his greatest gift to us each, grandchildren included. B. Love them individually. Spend time one-on-one with each one. C. Be sensitive to what their feelings are. And D. Listen. Dad was the master of listening. I learned how to parent from Dad. He loved his family like no one can and still loves us today. just in a different place. Thanks, Denise. Okay.
So most people looking from the outside in would think game night at the Fitzpatrick house was a blood sport. Dad was a very sly and strategic thinker who never shied away from any risk at the game table. He also never threw a game in his life, regardless of the ages of the others at the table. They could be 5 or 55. Made no difference. He played to win. Once a game was over, though, and before any next game could begin, he would tutor the losers on why he won and what they could do differently next time to gain the advantage. He would always challenge those he played against to play smarter or better. When one of us was able to finally win, he taught us how to win. Not to gloat, but how to win. He rejoiced in other successes at the game table just as much as if it was his success. What Dad was teaching us is the world doesn't owe you anything. It'll give you back exactly what you earn. Think strategically, act boldly, and be confident in your decisiveness. And I got another one.
Okay.
And I hope Mark can't hear this.
Oh, then let me get ready.
We had just moved into the house on Carousel Drive, and it had that whole house surround music, and it was also an intercom. And Jeff and I were out and back with Dad, and we were putting in some landscaping, and the neighbors had just come over, and they were talking, and we didn't know them real well, just moved in, right? And all of a sudden, Mark gets on the intercom, which is whole house, including outside, and says, "Chrissy, where's my clean underwear?" Chrissy, where's my clean underwear? And Dad just turned red and said, "Somebody run up there and tell him to shut up." And I turned around and looked at Dad and said, "I'm not going up there. He doesn't got any pants on." But you know, Dad always did cut up a little bit and let his hair down, and you know, got a little ribald when it was just us. But he always wanted to mind the proprieties when he was in public, and that was just a little too over the top for him.
One of my favorite memories of Dad in the evenings was his famous popcorn. Typically, as soon as we were all rushed off to bed, you could lay in your bed and hear the popcorn popping and smell the popcorn popping, but you typically weren't invited to share in the popcorn. But on an occasion, one evening, Dad was watching a movie with a big bowl of popcorn, and I got to sit on Dad's lap and share in the popcorn. And as we were sitting there and sharing the popcorn, I noticed, because I was very young, I noticed that there was something on TV that he was watching, and because I was only interested in the popcorn. And as I watched a little closer, I thought, this movie is just a little bit scary. And now as an adult, as I look back, we were watching Alfred Hitchcock, The Birds. And there was that one scene where the mom goes into and finds this gentleman that's laying in the bedroom. But anyway, and Dad knew that evidently I was uncomfortable because he rearranged in his leather recliner, and I ended up sitting behind him and peeking over his shoulder trying to see if it was safe to come out. But as I look back at it, I realized I wasn't really as scared as all that because I was sitting with my dad and he let me crawl behind him, and the monsters weren't going to get me because he was right there. So he made me feel safe and secure and not scared. So I guess what I've learned from it is that my daddy would never have let anything happen to me. He made me feel safe and secure. lifelong look. He set an example as to what I wanted for my husband and what I wanted for a father for my children. And that's what I got. So that's the end.
So the greatest gift that was learned at the knee of Tom Fitzpatrick, and this is true for everybody, is how to become wealthy. And I'm talking about wealth beyond your wildest dreams. Everybody that knew Tom has today a treasure trove of some of the most precious memories and stories that elicit every emotion. Every one of his children and his grandchildren hold the most valuable lessons that they've ever learned. Brothers, sisters, nephews, and nieces have all been overly blessed with laughs and joy and hugs and that are worth untold wealth. Tom freely shared a gentle, kind, and loving and humorous spirit, and it's one that we'll always hold dear, and it's one that will always live on with us until we get a chance to see him again.
What is it like to be a grandparent?
I find I have more time to be a grandparent than I did a parent. Sounds dumb, but this is the way it is.
It's a cinch, isn't it?
It is. I love it because, gee, when I'm finished, they can take them all home.
Right.
Okay. Now, Tom, probably all of the future generations of our family will watch this tape. Since you have the opportunity right now, what personal message would you like to give to them?
Future generations? Try to solve a lot of world conflicts. Hopefully, maybe we'll have that done before it gets to your time. And it's hard, still goes back the same old thing. It's hard to beat being honest and hardworking.